Stonehenge has baffled tourists and locals for decades, and even centuries. To outsiders, it may seem nothing more than a pointless monument, but the question as to where it came from and what its original purpose was has captivated the world ever since its discovery. A site that attracts visitors all across the globe every single year trying to find the truth. Sometime in the 1620s, King James I ordered the first known excavation and study of an ancient monument known as Stonehenge, an outer ring of mysterious stones situated in a field in Salisbury in Wiltshire, England. They stand around 13 feet tall, 7 feet wide and weigh around 25 tons. Inside the ring are some smaller stones, but the entire purpose of these rocks' placement, structure and location has baffled for centuries. The original name for the monument was actually Curvor, Old Irish Gaelic words which translate to mean great crime. It wasn't until 1740 when pendulous rocks were known as henges in Yorkshire and the name began to take shape. But the mystery remains. Where did Stonehenge come from and why? The main theory is that it was used as some kind of a burial site as early as 3000 BC. There is, however, evidence of reconstruction being done frequently for 1500 years. Unfortunately, animals burrowing in the area and poor excavation records being kept back then, it's impossible to know for sure when it was first constructed. Archaeologists did discover 4 and maybe 5 large Mesolithic post holes, the 5th possibly being a natural tree throw, so that remains unclear, which could be from as early as 8000 BC, which is located underneath an old tourist car park, which stopped being used in 2013. 3 of these were in an east-west alignment, which some believe could have been used as some kind of ritual. There are also other similar posts which were discovered, including in Blickmead, just 1 mile away, which could have also been connected. At the time of its construction, the field would have been completely covered with woodland, but around 4,000 years later, during the early Neolithic period, enclosures were built as well as with tombs nearby. Around 3500 BC, a Stonehenge cursus was built in an attempt to clear the trees and build upon the area. It's believed that the community responsible for building Stonehenge lived here for several millennia. The original structure consisted of a circular bank and ditch, about 360 feet in diameter, and was made on a slope. Those responsible then put bones of deer and oxen in the bottom, as well as some of their tools, though over time the ditch began to naturally silt up. Inside the outer edge of the structure was a circle of 56 pits, about 3.3 feet in diameter, now named the Aubrey Holes after John Aubrey, who made the discovery. They possibly contained standing timbers, though this is merely speculation and no evidence was found of them. Though an excavation did suggest that they may have used the Aubrey Holes to erect another circle of bluestones. Inside the Aubrey Holes, 50,000 cremated bones from 63 different people were all found buried. These were an equal number of men and women, but some also included children. There was a substantial amount of chalk found, and it's believed that it was used to mark the graves. It appears that whatever the original use of the Aubrey Holes may have been, it was now considered a burial site. Upon further investigation, the people buried here didn't seem to have even been from the local area, but more likely from Wales, where the bluestone would have been from as well. Further investigation suggested that the bluestones at Stonehenge had actually been used for another stone circle, very similar in the Welsh Preseli Hills, as it clearly showed signs of being reused. This would mean that man transported these rocks 150 miles from one location to another. It was used around 3400 BC and then dismantled again around 300 to 400 years later. So this leads us to believe that the other stones may have been reused from other structures as well. The second phase of the construction is a bit harder to pinpoint. We're to believe that some form of timber may have been built inside the structure. These could have been smaller than the Aubrey Holes, only around 16 inches in diameter. The ditch would have continued to silt up at this point, and it was during this phase most likely when Stonehenge became a frequent burial ground. It is the earliest known cremation cemetery within the British Isles. It was around 2600 BC when Stonehenge's third construction began. The builders completely abandoned timber and began using stone, digging 2 arrays of holes inside the centre, though it's believed that they could also be the remains of a double ring. A maximum of 80 stones could have been placed, though only 43 are proven today. As well as the theory that they were brought over from Wales, another suggestion is that glacial erratics by the Irish Sea may have brought them to shore, though there is no geographical evidence of this, and most agree that they were more likely transported by human means. However, this was brought back into question when a megalithic bluestone quarry was discovered in Pembrokeshire, where the stones may have come from. If humans did in fact move them, they would have most likely used rows of poles and frameworks to maneuver them. Some believe that the stones were even relocated to mark the territory of some immigrants moving from one region to another. There was a 110-metre stone circle found near Presley, and some of the stones could have been the same as the ones at Stonehenge, one of which even had a hole which matched a bizarre cross-section of a bluestone at Stonehenge, which some have described as being similar to a keyhole in a lock. During this phase, the entrances to the structure were broadened, supposedly to match sunrise and sunset, as well as building 4 station stones on top of mounds, which surprisingly did not consist of any burials. More ditches and banks were added, but then it was abandoned and left incomplete. The next phase of the construction included bringing in 30 massive sarsen stones from westwards, around 25 kilometres away. They were all erected as a 108-foot diameter circle of stones with 30 lintel stones resting on top of them. This was evidently intended to be the final structure. 75 stones would have been needed to complete the entire circle. It was originally believed that they left it unfinished, but upon further analysis of the area, it was evident that there were more sarsen stones which were later removed. On top of the sarsen stones, the images of a dagger and 14 axe heads were carved. Further illustrations were also found on 3 other stones, and based on their design, they were most likely carved with late Bronze Age weapons, estimating that this phase of the construction was between 2600 and 2400 BC. The remains of animal teeth were found 3 miles west of the structure, suggesting that they had been slaughtered sometime between 9 and 15 months after their birth in the spring, and the remains were brought as far away as from Scotland. This suggests that as many people as 4,000 gathered at Stonehenge during the winter and summer as some kind of celebration. It was most likely during this time when a timber circle was brought at Durrington Walls towards the rising sun on the midwinter solstice, an event still celebrated on the site to this day. It's believed that the circle at Durrington Walls represented the land of the living, while Stonehenge itself represented the land of the dead, with the nearby river Avon being a journey between the two. During the next phase, the blue stones were moved around again in a circle between the 2 sarsen rings, as well as in an oval in the centre, though some experts believe that some of these blue stones may have been brought in additionally from Wales. The altar stone may have also been moved during this time, but compared to the previous work, this wasn't done as adequately, and the new blue stones began to fall over. Regardless, after this phase, massive changes to the structure weren't being made anymore. However, one slight amendment was made at some point between 1930 and 1600 BC, as the northeastern section of the bluestone circle was removed, now forming the bluestone horseshoe. The Y and Z holes are the final known pieces of construction made at Stonehenge during the Iron Age. Roman coins and medieval artifacts were all discovered in and around the monument, but it's unclear if the structure was in use around this time or what purpose it served. There were no written records of those who built the monument, which leaves many more questions unanswered. The Great Trilithon, the encompassing horseshoe arrangement of the 5 central trilithons, the heel stone and the embanked avenue all aligned with the sunset of the winter solstice and the opposing sunrise of the summer solstice, leading people to believe that this was the deliberate intention of the construction, as well as the location of the monument. However, over the years, some have speculated that the stones would have been impossible for humans to have moved on their own. However, certain techniques have been theorized and deemed plausible, such as using a track of logs to roll the stones along, or a man-made track using animal fat as grease to slide them across the ground from one location to another. An experiment was conducted in 1995 near Stonehenge, trying to move a 40-ton slab of stone using this very method. And it worked. Others believed that the purpose of the monument was to observe astronomy, or as some kind of religious site. Others suggested it was a place for healing, using the grave sites and the trauma deformity in some of them, though it's not impossible that the site could have been used as a grave site as well as a place of worship. But interestingly, the bodies weren't even from the same area. A teenage boy from around 1550 BC was found near the Mediterranean Sea, while a metal worker from 2300 BC was found after having grown up near Germany, and another was from either Wales or France. Mike Parker Pearson suggested that Stonehenge was part of a ritual landscape, joining the world of the living and the dead to celebrate past ancestors and the recently deceased. Regardless, the design of the structure includes a celestial observatory function, which may have allowed them to predict an eclipse, solstice, equinox, and other celestial events, which may have been part of a specific religion. Another theory is that the structure was actually built as a symbol of peace and unity. At the time, Britain's Neolithic people were going through a period of cultural unification, and the bodies excavated on the site may have been put there after this time period, though some believe that something more supernatural was involved. On the monument, the igneous bluestones would give off a strange, loud clanging noise once struck. Back then, rocks that rang out like this, which they called lithophonic rocks, were believed to have contained mystic or healing powers. This adds to the theory of Stonehenge being a place for healing. Furthermore, it's theorised that the stones came from a quarry near a town in Wales called Miclawclog, which translates to ringing rock, where the stones were used as church bells in the 18th century. DNA extracted from the human remains across the country were examined to try to determine the ancestors of the builders, and it was suggested that they were Eastern Mediterranean farmers travelling west. They were mostly Aegean and may have come from Anatolia. They would have moved to Iberia before heading north and arriving in Britain in around 4000 BC. It's also a possibility that Stonehenge may have actually been the first ever monument constructed, and it introduced building large megaliths as a tradition. At the time, most of Britain consisted of Western hunter-gatherers, so when the builders arrived, they wouldn't have mixed well, and instead the population was more or less replaced with migrants. In around 2500 BC, the Bell-Beaker people arrived from Europe, replacing more of the population of Britain, and these would have also contributed to the construction of Stonehenge. These would have had strong links with the rest of Europe. They were associated with tin, which was Britain's only unique export at the time, and would have helped with wealth and powerful connections in order to continue building the structure. But what leads to even more questions is the various stories created over the years. At the northeast of the Southern Circle lies the Heel Stone. This would be where you would see the sun rise, but folklore states, quote, "The devil bought the stones from a woman in Ireland, wrapped them up and brought them to Salisbury Plain. One of the stones fell into the Avon, the rest were carried to the plain. The devil then cried out, 'No one will ever find out how these stones came here.' A friar replied, 'That's what you think,' whereupon the devil threw one of the stones at him and struck him on the heel. The stone stuck in the ground and is still there." End quote. Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote a 12th century story, Historia Regum Britanniae, where Stonehenge was brought from Ireland with the help of the wizard Merlin. In the story there were healing stones, which giants had brought from Africa to Ireland. They were raised on Mount Killarrows to form a stone circle. The 5th century king Aurelius Ambrosius wanted to build a great memorial to the noble British Celtics that was slain by the Saxons at Salisbury. He sent Merlin and King Arthur's father, Uther Pendragon, with 15,000 men to do the job. They defeated an Irish army led by Gillamanias, but they were unable to move the stones. With Merlin's help they moved them and recreated their original structure. Though this story may be fiction, some historians are convinced that there may actually be some truth behind it, considering the fact that the stones do appear to have come from the seas of Wales. Another legend is that Hengist, the Saxon king, invaded British Celtic warriors and ordered his men to kill 420 of them. Once accomplished, he built Stonehenge to show his remorse and guilt for what he had done. It was only in the 20th century when Stonehenge became a religious site for pagans and neo-druids. It was in August of 1905 when the ancient order of druids performed a mass initiation ceremony on the site, admitting 259 new members into their group, though this was heavily mocked in the press due to their appearance and attire. In 1923, the decapitated remains of a Saxon man dating as far back as the 7th century was dug up on the site. Over the years, festivals took place at Stonehenge more and more frequently. Originally, you were able to not only walk around the stones, but touch and even climb on top of them, though this was changed in 1977 when they were completely roped off to prevent further erosion. Furthermore, access was actually closed in 1985 due to the high volume of visitors. This even led to what's now known as the Battle of the Beanfield, which involved law enforcement being forced to stop a convoy of travellers from entering the site. This led to Stonehenge becoming a lot more restricted, with no religious access allowed under any circumstances. This ended around the time the 2000s rolled around, when a European Court of Human Rights lifted the restrictions, which ruled that members of any genuine religion did have a right to worship. And as Stonehenge was a place of worship to neo-druids and pagans, the ban was finally lifted. In 2000, an Opus Summer Solstice event took place in which 7,000 attended, which increased to 10,000 the following year. You are now able to walk around the stones from a short distance away, or with specific ticketed access, enter the circle itself, and it continues to be a visiting spot during the summer and winter solstice. Furthermore, there were even plans to completely reroute two adjacent roads near the monument, the A303 and the A344, but due to the sheer expenses, these plans were cancelled. Though the latter was eventually closed down to make room for a visitor centre for the monument, where locals and travellers around the world can come together to collectively continue seeking answers.